This is a topic I'm looking forward to talking about. Divorce or any major upheaval faces the choice. Either you run away from it and spend the rest of your life running from it, or you face what's underneath. Most of us want to heal. We say we want to heal, but I find that few actually do because healing isn't just time passing. It's an active process of facing the parts of yourself you'd rather avoid. Now, when you go through a healing process, on the surface, you probably will hit a wall. And on the surface, you're functioning, you're going to work, you're with your kids, you're maybe dating after a divorce. But inside, it feels like a stranger in your own life, like you don't belong anywhere. You feel like an alien. This is what's commonly known as the dark night of the soul. And it's the dark side of healing and growth. And I think most people struggle with it. It's hard because it's a war inside of you. And I saw a meme the other day and it fits nicely into this. Your inner child craves safety. Your inner teenager demands justice, but your adult self just wants peace. And the dark night of the soul isn't poetic. It's just dark. If you move through it and listen deeply rather than running away from it, over time, something shifts. And the anger starts to quiet, the fear loses its grip, and that sense of loss gives way to clarity. Hope is my guest today. She helps people to navigate this process. She's a functional diagnostic nutrition practitioner, a human design expert, and a Reiki practitioner. She helps people break through emotional and spiritual resistance. And today we're going to talk about what's really happening when you hit that wall of the dark night of the soul and why removing resistance makes you feel lost instead of free and how to get through it. So, Hope, welcome.
Thank you. Thanks for having me, Jeff.
So, given that you work with deep layers of trauma, I must imagine you help people with the dark night of the soul a lot.
Yeah, it definitely comes up in my work. Yeah.
So let's start with a definition of what is the dark night of the soul. What's going on underneath?
Yeah, I think there's multiple ways you can look at this. And if the dark night of the soul doesn't resonate with you, I feel it's essentially you're kind of in the void of this remembering, and it's a remembering of who you are and a detachment of who you thought you were, or maybe who you were conditioned to be, and a remembering of who you were designed to be. And that's what it was for me.
I've heard it described as you're not who you were anymore, and you're not who you're going to become. You're sort of in that gray area between those
in the
two
void.
places.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's utterly confusing.
Totally.
It's yeah, you're still doing the things you were doing before. You're driving to work, but you don't feel right.
Right.
Like something just feels completely off.
Yeah. I mean, there's, some people feel a sense of apathy where you're like, I'm doing the thing, but I don't really care about the thing that I'm doing. A feeling like you don't know who you are. Why am I here? It's kind of like the questioning your life's purpose. Like, why am I here? What is life? These are the questions that are coming up in the void.
And maybe you didn't think of those things before. All of a sudden you have big questions and whereas before you were like, what's for dinner?
Exactly. Yeah. Pretty much.
So what led you to do this work? Was there like this pivotal moment that I think a lot of healers get into this because they have a crisis themselves?
Yeah. I think there is multiple events in life that led me down this path of doing the things that I do. Essentially, my work is kind of putting together science and spirituality because, as you mentioned, I'm a functional practitioner, but then I also do this emotional and spiritual work, kind of the physical, the emotional, spiritual bodies, putting all that together. And as I said, there's kind of multiple paths that led me here. I had my own health journey that led me down the path of becoming a functional practitioner. And I had, my health, the short version is I had health issues growing up. I had gut issues growing up. And then I also had disordered eating behavior, which those two things were definitely connected. Obviously, looking back now, didn't know it at the time. And so that led me down the path of becoming a functional practitioner. But the spiritual and emotional pieces came when I was working with predominantly women at the time. And, we're talking about hormones and they want to lose weight or they want to drop 10 pounds, whatever, but recognizing that what was actually going on in their bodies required deeper conversations and talking about calories and macros. So there was hormonal, there was gut things, there was trauma, there's these emotional patterns that were all leading to the physical things that were happening in their body. And so that, along with my own kind of spiritual awakening at the time, led me down the path of diving into human design and into Reiki and into becoming a clinical hypnotherapist and doing all of these emotional, mental, spiritual modalities to tie into my work to really get to the root cause. I am of the belief that what is happening on the physical body, all of it has a root cause in emotional, energetic things going on under the surface. And so I wanted to be able to bring that piece into my work and really help people get to the, quote unquote root cause.
It's funny how these practical crises lead to the spiritual path if you follow it far enough. Like the work I do is around helping men through a divorce, and you don't think when you're going into a courtroom that you're going to go into a dark night of the soul or contemplate your navel and ask these deep questions of yourself. You just think it's this one level, but really there's deep layers to go through.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah. And I mean, my kind of spiritual awakening journey started with, really, honestly, I think it started with my own divorce. And that was kind of what kicked off my dark night of the soul. And I, at the time, well, looking back, I see it now, I had my whole identity wrapped up in that relationship, right? Marriage, my role as a wife, whatever. And it ended completely out of the blue. For me, it was anyway. Like it was just one of those things. It was like one day to the next, and then it was over. And I had no idea what to do with myself. Like didn't realize I had no sense of who I was. I had no personal identity, like all of these things. So it was that for me is what kicked it off. And I had a friend at the time that it was really harsh advice at the time. I was like, well, that was rude. But she basically was telling me like the reason you're so torn up about this divorce is because you really don't know who you are outside of that relationship. Like your identity is attached to this person. And I didn't realize at the time that really was what kicked off kind of my own spiritual journey for me of discover, like you were talking about the dark night of the soul, like discovering like, who am I? What do I believe? Like, what are my actual values and beliefs and opinions and all of those things?
Sometimes we need those tough questions or that person that you think is a jerk.
Totally.
But they're asking you the tough questions,
Yes,
right?
absolutely.
And I think that's a coach's role, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you probably do this where you say something that seems harsh and the person might take it as harsh, but you're prompting them to ask deeper questions of themselves.
That's it.
So how do you know you're going through a dark night of the soul? Like you said, looking back, you realized you were going through it. And I've been through it. I'm probably going through it now. I've been through it dozens of times. Well, maybe not dozens, but more than a handful of times. How do I know that I'm going through it?
Yeah. I think it's when those kind of existential questions just kind of start flowing into your mind. I think you kind of follow the trail of, like I said before, like, why am I here? What am I doing? And I think too, it's some other common signs. It's, like you were saying, we're doing the thing, we're going to work, we're doing the thing, we're doing everything. But there's this lack of fulfillment in the things that normally would have brought us maybe joy or fulfillment or excitement. There's this potential apathy, or I don't really care about what I'm doing. And for me, and I too, I've gone through it more than once myself. And for me, each time I found myself like going through the motions and I'm like, I know I'm doing what I've been called to do. Like I know I'm doing my soul's work, but I don't really care about it. Like it doesn't feel good to me. It's not lighting me up. It's not bringing me this fulfillment. And so that for me is a sign, okay, where do I need to pivot? Where do I need to ask myself those questions? What do I need to let go of? What do I need to change how I'm doing things? Or so it's these feelings of just feeling a little bit lost in the in-between. Like I said, the void earlier, being in the void, being in this in-between, questioning your identity, maybe questioning your relationships. All of these existential questions are what's coming up for you in this time.
To me, it doesn't feel like depression. Like there's a slight
Yes.
difference between depression and dark night of the soul.
Yes.
Depression is just, what's the point? Who cares?
Right.
But Dark Night of the Soul, I still find, like, in both cases, I'm still low energy. Many times I don't want to get out of bed in either case. But I think, for me anyway, and I don't know if this is common, but it's accompanied, Dark Night of the Soul is accompanied by those existential questions as you were.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah, I think so too. And I think too, for me, this is how I've experienced it. There's also like you were saying, yes, I get that. The low energy, I totally experienced that. The low energy, the just kind of blah feeling, but there's also this underlying desire to seek out what's on the other side. Whereas depression, I feel like just kind of sucks you down. I feel like for me, I didn't know what was on the other side, but I still had this desire deep down to see what was on the other side for me.
As you were saying that, what I just thought was depression, it feels like there's no hope,
Mm,
whereas Dark Night of the Soul, there is hope, but you don't know how to
exactly.
get
You
there.
don't know where it is or how far away it is, but you know it's there somewhere. Yeah, totally.
Yeah. One of the hardest parts of transformation is resistance, and we fight that change even though we know it's necessary. How do you see that playing out in people's healing?
Yeah, that's the hard part. It's like you said at the beginning. I mean, if everybody chose the road to healing, we'd all be like winning at life and forever. So I think the healing part requires a willingness. And I mean, I think in some ways it takes courage to ask yourself the hard questions, because it is going to require some often painful realizations about yourself and about, again, like who you are meant to be, who you're designed to be. And it requires this level of deconditioning. And that's, for me, human design is something I tie into my work. And this is a rabbit hole we could go down another day, but essentially human design is your soul's energetic blueprint. So it's learning about how your energy is designed to operate here on earth. And so for me, that's the piece that I use to help my clients with this piece, because it helps them understand themselves at an energetic level. And this is where the deconditioning process starts to happen, where we can understand how I'm designed to operate in this life, how I'm designed to operate with other people, all of these things, versus how I've been conditioned to do these things, whether it's through society, generations, your family, whatever. But it's letting go of this conditioning and letting go of who you think you are, or who you were told you are, or whatever, and then who you were actually designed to be. And this is there's a lot of resistance there, because we're used to being these things. We're used to acting a certain way. We're used to believing certain things. We're used to these patterns. And so that's where the uncomfortability comes, in being able to let go of these patterns that really were not designed for you, but they're just subconscious programs running the show, and stepping into your true identity. And it requires you to look at some deep, hard truths about yourself the majority of the time. Like, this is not a painless process. And this is why not everybody does it, right? Because we are forced to look at these things and change how we see things, change how we do things, change our beliefs about things. And that's uncomfortable.
So if I can draw a line, I don't want to stay practical, because when you're going through a Dark Night of the Soul, you're like I found personally anyway, talking about the soul stuff to be um a I agree with you. It just I get lost in it.
Mm,
And I can't quite connect with it often. So to s- I- let me draw the line. So you have a realization about yourself, and that realization can be something like, maybe I shouldn't have married that
mm,
person. What does that say about
mm-hmm,
me? What's going on underneath? And then it's almost like, as you were kind of describing, you were designed to be this way, but you have been heading this
mm-hmm.
way. So it's the snap back to closer to this line. And then what happens under that is resistance. And if you haven't read the book War of Art, I highly recommend it,
Mm-hmm.
because it talks about what resistance is. It's a force that keeps you stuck, and it's preventing, like, you it's almost like your ego is pushing back at this realignment.
Yes.
But the Dark Night of the Soul is difference between who you thought you were, who you are, um, and just feeling lost in between
Yeah.
those two
That's
places.
exactly it. Yeah. Yeah. And you mentioned the word ego there, and you've probably heard of, people listening have probably heard of the word ego death. Like, this is what happens. It's like the ego death over and over again, of having to, yeah, what you're saying. It's this letting go of who you thought you were and who your ego is telling you you were. And I think that is one of the toughest parts, the whole ego death thing, like allowing those parts of you to die away. And I had this conversation on a podcast a few weeks ago. We are talking about the grieving process that happens. And again, I didn't recognize this in the moment, in the time where I was going through my divorce. But looking back now, I mean, there's been multiple times that this has happened in my life since then. This is 15 years ago. But the grieving that has to happen, of grieving this part of you, this aspect of you, this version of you that's no longer coming with you. And that's really hard. I just feel like we don't talk about this enough, and maybe we don't talk about it at all. But there's a grieving process that happens, of letting that part of you go, because it's no longer serving you, and it's not coming with you. into the next stage.
I was on a podcast a couple months ago where the whole topic of the podcast was grief. That's all she talked
Mm,
about, and I never really made that connection that that's what's so hard about really anything is it's that grieving
yes.
process. It's bloody
It
hard.
is. It is. It really is. And we don't, I think because we don't talk about it enough, that's why there's so much resistance. And because that's like, that's the uncomfortable part. It's letting go of these parts of you. And gosh, I mean, I can, there's so many times in my life that this has happened where I'm like, why do I feel so sad? And why do I feel so like all these emotions are coming up? And it is that grieving process and being able to feel the grief and not push the grief aside. Because I think that's also what either prolongs or could make a lot of people like turn around, like let me make a U-turn, like I don't want to go through this healing process again because of that part right there, the grieving part that has to happen.
So what's the way through it? Actually, no, let me ask the other way around. When people do resist that change, what are some of the ways that they resist it? What does that look like?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really just staying stuck in the same patterns. And sometimes this is a subconscious thing, but I think the healing process requires a certain level of self-awareness. I think that's the first important thing to say. It requires a certain level of self-awareness to be aware that I'm recognizing these patterns in myself. I'm recognizing these things about myself that I want to heal or I want to change or improve or whatever. And so I think when we decide to not step into that process and really embrace the grieving process, then we get stuck in the same old loop. And I've had clients, I've had family members that it's so apparent on the outside because you're seeing them. They're in the same toxic relationships over and over again. They're in the same dead-end job over and over again. They're in the same pattern of, doing bad things for their health over and over again. Like you see the patterns continue, and it really is just a resistance to that internal change that needs to happen, that grieving process that needs to happen to be able to get to the other side of that.
What are some practical ways to know that you're in that resistance? I find so many people just that doesn't even register to them like that I'm going through a
Mm-hmm.
divorce, but I'm still in the same crappy patterns as when around my job. Like
Mm-hmm.
it shows up in all areas
Right,
of life.
right.
How do you even make that connection between those two areas of
Yeah.
life?
Well, first of all, the patterns always translate to every aspect of life. So I think the first important thing is that self-awareness piece comes in. And I think that's when it's time to kind of take personal inventory of all the aspects of your life. And I've had so many clients too where they never recognize it because most women, people I work with, men too, are coming to me for their health, but they're not recognizing that these patterns that are happening in their health are happening in their business and their marriage and their relationships. Where you find one thing, it's happening in every aspect of your life because it's all interconnected, right? You cannot compartmentalize all these different aspects of you. So I think the first thing is just the awareness that it is all connected. And maybe it's time to take stock and take inventory of where am I feeling less than fulfilled? What aspects of my life am I feeling less than fulfilled? Where am I feeling stuck, resistance, contraction, frustration, bitterness, like all of these emotions? Like this is a good, and which is why I love human design, because this is another thing to understand these pieces about yourself, to be able to understand what emotions come up for you when you are in misalignment, when you're in these patterns. It's understanding the emotions that are coming up and the feelings that are basically your kind of compass to let you know, hey, I'm following in the same patterns and something is out of alignment.
What are some practical tips on building that awareness?
I think first, this is going to sound very boring, but I think first is cultivating some sort of mindfulness practice. And I know it's very cliche and a lot of people, this is not the sexy answer you're looking for, but the fact is when we are going and going and going 24/7, 365, we're not creating the space to build and cultivate that self-awareness. This is where the mindfulness practices come in. Now, you don't have to go be a monk and meditate for 4 hours a day. Well, that's great if you have that capability, but just creating some space in your day to get out of your head and into your body and feel what's coming up for you. Like I tell my clients, you can sit at your desk and do this, just sitting and feeling. You're tuning into your breath. I'm closing my eyes and listening to what is my body telling me right now? Do I feel discomfort or resistance anywhere? But taking that time on a daily basis is really what cultivates that awareness and just understanding the signs and signals your body is sending you. I mean, this is why I think the lack of intention to this piece is an underlying cause of so much physical distress and relational distress. It's just not being aware of what's going on in our body and the signs and signals our body is telling us, which is why we end up with things like chronic disease, why we end up in toxic relationships, because we haven't taken the space to recognize what the signs, what our body is telling us.
Agreed completely. And it isn't a sexy answer, but when you're going through something as complex as Dark Night of the Soul, usually I find the best thing to do is simplify. So I like your answer around just mindfulness. And mindfulness doesn't even have to be meditation.
Right.
It's just whatever gets you into the present moment. And I use this example all the time. I do boxing, and what I like about boxing is that it's physical. So you're moving the emotion and the energy out. But also, if depression is focused on the past and anxiety is focused on the future, the antidote to that is to be in the present moment. And if you're boxing, and this is my favorite thing to say, you can't be worried about what's going to happen in the future and what's going to happen in the past if somebody's trying to punch you in the face.
That's so true.
So find something that just gets you into the present moment, even if it's 5 minutes a day, whatever it is.
Yeah. And there's so many things. That's what I was about to say, whatever it is, because I've had clients who, it's gardening or it's cooking or it's drawing or it's just walking or literally just sitting there and counting your breath for 5 minutes. I mean, it could literally be anything.
I've just started adding breath work into my routine, and I find that very, very,
I love breath work.
like 10 minutes of breath work into 5 or 10 minutes of meditation is just, it works wonders for me. One more thing I'll add to that. You said courage earlier. Find tenacity helps. And I had a whole discussion about this the other day, but it's the right amount of tenacity that you have to really want to, like we were talking about this motion of this is who you thought you were, this is who you actually are. It takes tenacity to bring it to move your alignment back into this place. Just that constant desire to really ask deep questions and go deeper and one more aspect, curiosity.
Yes.
So curiosity to move that needle back.
Yep. I love the curiosity piece. And that's a big one that I hone in with. I'm glad you brought that up, because that's a big one I help my clients with too, because I think the other thing that happens that gets people kind of stuck in their healing journey or stuck in the dark night of the soul, where they feel like they're never going to get out, is instead of curiosity, they bring judgment. And so with judgment, that's just going to make you more frustrated. If I'm judging why I'm here and what's happening and what's going to happen next and what did I do to get me here, rather than the curiosity piece of, can I be curious about potential patterns or what's next for me or what's on the other side? That there's a big difference there. And I think that can be the difference between feeling stuck in the dark night of the soul and kind of having this acceptance and excitement because there's something big on the other side for you. Because I think that's the beauty of being in the dark night of the soul is you can have, that adage, you don't, the breakdown comes before the breakthrough. Like that's what the dark night of the soul is. And so to recognize there's something huge for me on the other side of this, and I'm meant to be in this and learn something about myself and gather all this wisdom in this void in this particular time that I can bring with me to whatever's on the other side of this. I mean, that's the beauty of it.
Yeah, agreed 100%. And that's the tenacity of just putting your one more foot in front of it, like going
one step at a time. Yep.
I lost my next question. When somebody's in it, what's the biggest mistake they can make?
The biggest mistake. I think it's hard to narrow down just one.
Well, what are the top three? Whatever.
Yeah. I think actually going back to what I was just saying, I think one of the big ones is bringing in judgment rather than curiosity. I think that gets you stuck in the frustration and stuck in a loop. And I know I've been there. I feel like that the first time that I consciously was going through it after my divorce, I feel like I was there for a while with the judgment of, because it's the judgment, and then it's you play the coulda, woulda, shoulda. If I would have done this, and then I could have done this, and maybe this would have, you get stuck in the loop, and So I think bringing judgment versus bringing in the curiosity. I think also the tenacity. I like that you brought the word tenacity, being open to what's on the other side. And there's a level of acceptance. So rather than resisting, that's what I want to say, rather than resisting, accepting that you're in there. The resistance is also going to breed frustration because it's preventing you from looking at whatever lessons you're meant to learn in this particular phase, in this particular stage. And so if we can accept it, and like you were saying, just put one step in front of the other, I think that's another thing that can potentially prolong this particular dark night of the soul or whatever you want to call it, just resisting the change, resisting the lessons, resisting the wisdom, resisting whatever it is you're meant to learn.
I find when I The reason for mindfulness and tuning into the body, and it's so funny how many times I've done this. I've done that meditation, or I've done that presence practice, is I learn to tune into myself just a little bit better every time. And I find deep down, usually for me, it's in the gut, deep in the gut, but I know some other people are different. It's unique for every person. It's just find sometimes I'm tense and there's this tenseness in there, and you just said open to it. And when you find that resistance, that closed downness, that clench feeling, there's almost like this practice of opening to it and relaxing
That's
into
it.
it. It's hard to describe unless you're there,
Mhm.
unless you've done it,
Mhm.
but you're constantly opening to it. And there's been so many times where I tune into it, and then all of a sudden it opens up just a little bit more and a little bit more and a little bit more. And that's the action of going through
Mhm.
it. And when you go through, and when you release that, when you relax into it, there's almost like this little whisper that comes up and says, don't do that, or do this thing over here, or something like that. There's a whisper that comes
On the other
underneath.
side, yeah.
What's going on there?
Yeah, it's so there's a practice I do with my clients. I call them quantum healing sessions, but it's essentially putting together a handful of modalities using subconscious reprogramming and energy and Reiki and all the things we kind of mentioned before. But that's kind of the goal, what you were describing. It's like when you can feel this resistance in your body and can relax into it, that's when it lets go. And for me, when I'm doing these sessions with clients, we're trying to excavate what are these kind of underlying emotions that are stuck and stored in the body. And so I'm asking them to identify, it's listening to your body. I'm asking them to identify, where are you feeling this in the body? What does it feel like? What is the shape? What is the texture? We're identifying and leaning into this. Once we can bring our attention there, it's just like you said, you feel it, it feels different for everybody. It might be a poking or a contraction or resistance or a pulling or a nagging, or it feels some sort of resistance, right? When we can bring our attention there and lean into it instead of resisting it, this is when it can let go. And I tell them these things that are stuck in the body, it's like a petulant child that just wants your attention. Once we bring your attention to it, then it's like, that's all I needed. I just needed you to be aware that I was here and feel into it and relax into it, and then it can emote, right? But I'm talking about emotions here. Emotions are energy and motion, and that's that feeling you're talking about, that contraction in your body, in your gut, or whatever as you feel it. There's some sort of energy there that needs to move, and that's what emotions are designed to do. It's when we resist it that they get stuck, stored, stagnant in the body, and causes a lot of other things. I can go down a rabbit hole there. But the point is, once we can bring our attention to it and relax into it and accept it rather than resist it, this is when the ease happens. And like you said, it opens up this portal to your intuition, so you can feel those whispers and those nudges and what's the next best step.
But I completely agree with you, and I find that's an absolutely necessary step, especially when going through the dark night of the soul, because if you resist it, that's what's going to keep you
Mm-hmm.
stuck. And in order to let go of those patterns, unfortunately for a lot of people hearing this, you're going to have to feel it.
Yeah, that's it.
You can't run
That's
away
it.
from it your whole
That's the
life.
hard part. It's the feeling it. And it's not like, I know a lot of my clients, when we go into the sessions, that's like, they're like, I don't want to relive my trauma. It's not about reliving your trauma. It's about tapping into that emotion that wanted to be felt in the moment, but you didn't allow yourself to feel that emotion. And so you don't have to replay. It's not about replaying your trauma or reliving it. It's can we provide a safe environment in the body to feel that emotion that wanted to move through at that particular time, and let it move. It just needs to move through the body. It's just it's allowing yourself to feel it. I mean, I've had clients with massive breakthroughs on the other side of just letting themselves feel the emotion that's there.
So what does a breakthrough look like?
Yeah, that's a good question. So I have lots of examples. So I work a lot with business owners and entrepreneurs. And so for a lot of them, it's what's happening in their business on the other side. I've had clients who, I have crazy stories about things that have happened physically in their body after they've had these big emotional releases, and then it opens up new opportunities, and it opens up. I've had a few clients, their goal was to start a family with their husbands, and now all of a sudden, now they're getting pregnant where they weren't getting pregnant before. They have new opportunities in their business. One started this whole new revenue stream in her business. Like, these ideas and these opportunities just show up. It's not coincidence, but it's because we've allowed the energy to move in their body. And so now they're attracting all of these things that they've been desiring.
From a skeptical point of view, I must imagine you have a lot of skeptics. And how
Sure.
do you speak to that when they're like, what do you mean feeling my emotions leads to me getting pregnant?
Yeah.
Not me,
Yeah.
but someone getting
Yeah,
pregnant.
yeah. I mean, here's the thing. We can act like energy and talking about energy as woo stuff, but there's plenty of science to back up energy. We know that everything is energy. And we know that everything from, the chair I'm sitting on to my body, everything is made up of energy that is moving. So this is a scientific fact. And so if we can look past like the woo part of the energy stuff and look at it in a scientific way, what happens when you feel an emotion is a chemical reaction in the body. There are neurotransmitters and hormones and all kinds of things happening in your body when you have this emotional reaction. That actual emotional reaction physically only lasts about 90 seconds. When we allow ourselves to attach stories to these emotions, when we're feeling an emotion in the moment, that's what causes the internal turmoil to happen in the body. Because an emotional reaction physically, scientifically, it only happens, it's like a 90-second thing, right? When the chemical messengers, the neurotransmitters, the hormones are doing their thing when you have this emotional event or emotional outburst. It's when we attach the stories to it and we attach beliefs about that particular emotion that allows it to perpetuate. The fact is that emotions and energy, all of these things are real things. Like we know it. I mean, if you think about physically, like if you've ever been nervous about something and you feel your stomach is kind of in knots, right? Or you're feeling stressed and you've got a headache, like we feel physical things when our emotions are feeling a certain way. So it should be to me, it's like there's no way to be skeptical about this because we know that physical things happen when we have emotional experiences. And so it's just a matter of leaning into that and allowing ourselves to feel safe to feel those emotions instead of turning them off or suppressing them or repressing them or shoving them aside.
A lot of that sounds like Joe Dispenza's work.
Love Joe Dispenza. Yes.
You Are the Placebo. I
Yes.
read that half a dozen
I've read all of
times.
his books, been to his workshops. I love using that as an example because he really does bring like the untangible down to earth to the tangible because he's got so many studies and all the sciencey stuff to show like what happens when these things happen, when the emotions happen in your body. And yeah, I love that.
There's a crappy movie, I think it's called We Bought a Zoo, but there's a banger of a quote in it that goes something like, pardon me if I butcher it. Sometimes in life, all you need is 20 seconds of insane courage. And that reminded me of that
Mm,
90 seconds of having 20 seconds of courage overrides that
mhm.
90 seconds of feeling that emotion.
100%.
So that might get you through
Yeah,
it.
that's it. Yeah, knowing that. Well, and I think just recognizing that part too of like the emotion itself is such a quick thing and recognizing like the reason I'm still feeling XYZ is because there's this story that I've attached to this emotion. Like for me, it's okay. Well, let me be curious. You bring in that curiosity. Let me be curious about the story I've attached to this emotion because the emotion is not still there. Like the emotional reaction already happened, but now I'm repeating the story in my head. And it's like Dr. Joe Dispenza says, your personality creates your personal reality. Like we just keep the story going rather
Mhm.
than like feeling the thing and we just feel it and let it go and not attach the story to it.
The way it was explained to me was we have these energy centers in our
Mhm.
body, and if you allow them to come to the surface, emotions will be digested in those energy
Yeah.
centers. So if you resist it, you're preventing your body from digesting that
Yeah.
energy. So that's an argument, a practical argument on why you should feel the emotion.
That's it.
So, with that said, the reason I mention that is I think on the whole, I'm not speaking individually, but on the whole, it seems like there's a difference between how men and women process emotions or
Mm,
allow themselves to process those
mhm.
emotions. So, given that you work with both men and women, what's the difference there?
Yeah, that's it. Well, how much time do you have?
No,
This is the big question, but I think that, the big thing I think one of the big differences is at least, and this is just, I'm not speaking for everybody. I want to speak for everybody here, but most of the women I work with, there's more openness to be vulnerable, right? There's this vulnerability piece that can be really hard for men. And again, not speaking for everybody, because there are plenty of men who are okay being vulnerable. But generally speaking, most women have an easier time being vulnerable and allow themselves to quote, go there, where the vulnerability piece can be more of a challenge for men. Especially, we can talk a lot about societal conditioning that, perpetuates, why men suppress emotion or the easiest emotion to feel is anger. And anger covers up so many other emotions that want to be felt. And so for men, there's a lot of men with pent up anger and rage that's covering so many other things deep down. Most of it is fear. Fear is typically what anger is covering up, but it's easier to feel anger than to feel fear. And so I think for men, it's kind of getting past those surface level emotions and getting to what's really there. And that vulnerability piece is really required to go there. And it's just typically easier for women, or women are more open to go there.
How do you suggest men develop that vulnerability? To add to that, I think we absolutely, the societal conditioning, I think a lot of the time men are conditioned to go over the top of the foxhole to face the enemy in battle, or go into the burning building to save the kids. So we have to push those emotions down, and we're almost trained to do it, but we don't seem to have that process anymore of allowing them out. And if you've ever seen the movie The Northman, and I'm sure there's other examples, but there's a scene in it just before they go into battle. It's a bunch of men, they're about to attack a village, and they're like going like this, and they're shouting and screaming and acting like animals, and just like waving their arms around. And I imagine that was developed naturally to allow that fear out, that they might die. But we don't seem to have that anymore.
Yeah.
Like, it's walk to work or drive to work and go sit in your cubicle and under fluorescent lights, but we never actually have those rituals
Right.
anymore of allowing those emotions
Right.
out in a safe way.
Yeah, that's I agree with that 100%. And I think you just kind of being stuck in the rat race is one reason why we have so much. And I think it goes back to what we were saying before, that taking the space for the mindfulness and like taking space to get out of your head and into your body. It's equally as important for men as to women. Like, it's not just something that you would recommend to women. So I think the first step for men is starting there. Like, can you just be aware of yourself, right? Can you get out of your head and into your body for 5 minutes a day to start to bring in that self-awareness? The more you can stop resisting the silence, because I think this is another thing that's hard for people, is it's uncomfortable to be in the silence because you're afraid of what's going to come up. So if we can start to cultivate that mindfulness and be more comfortable in the silence and be more comfortable in this kind of in between, like, and bring in that curiosity versus fear of what's going to come up. I think this is for both men and women. Like, this is the first step to being confident on this healing path, because when we can be comfortable in the silence, when we can be comfortable listening to the signs and signals our body's sending us, this is when we get the answers we're looking for. This is when we're going to get the answers to, oh, this is the emotion that I've been shoving down. So I think all of us, men and women alike, both, it just requires more space and courage to be in the silence and listen to what's alive in our bodies.
Absolutely. And what that looks like practically too, when I was starting one of my businesses, I found myself getting really low energy and really angry a lot of the time. And then I was about to launch this product, and like the week before, I got really sick, like headaches, and I was sleeping 10 hours a night and 3 naps during the day, and it was rough. And what I did, a lot of people in that case just go, oh, it's a cold. But like, the coincidence was too strong that I was launching a product and I was getting sick just before that. And this worked for me, is just to sit with that uncomfortable feeling. And what I eventually found, and when I was drifting off to sleep, I would just meditate and just allow it to feel. Maybe that's why I was napping 3 times a day, because I was just meditating all the time. But eventually I sat with that anger, and underneath there was this profound sense of grief. For myself, it was not being able to, like, I was disconnecting from other people because I was going on this entrepreneurial journey, and I knew I was going to be leaving people behind. Like, when you go through an entrepreneurial journey, you come out different. And going through that, just felt there was this sense of loss and grief and sadness. And I think that's the hard part. And that's why a lot of people don't do an entrepreneurial journey, or their own that's why they don't do those hard things, is because they don't want to feel that grief.
That's it. Yeah, that's it. 100%. That's a tough one to feel. Well, like I said, anger is the easiest one to feel. It's easier to be angry than to face your grief or your fear. It's just how it is. So it can be that can be a really challenging part for people.
But I take it as a signal that something else is going
Exactly.
on.
Exactly. Listening to the signals.
Look for those
Mm-hmm.
moments. So how does human design help somebody understand their own kind of healing journey as they go through it?
Yeah. So, human design, if you've never heard of human design, I'll give you just the brief overview. Basically, it's putting together some really ancient teachings of the chakra system, the I Ching, astrology, the Kabbalah, and it puts it together with more modern day sciences like quantum mechanics and quantum physics and neuroscience, and it puts it together into this chart. And while even the mention of astrology can make people like put their fingers in their ears, there is a lot of science to back this up because it all goes back to these little subatomic particles called neutrinos and like where the neutrinos were when you were born, how it affects your DNA. So there's a lot of science to it. But as I mentioned before, it's essentially your soul's energetic blueprint. So it's how you are designed to interact with the world around you, with other people, make decisions, your life's lessons, your soul's path you're meant to take. There's so many aspects that you can learn in your human design. And it basically just allows you, we talked about the deconditioning part earlier, it allows you to really understand the way you were designed versus how you were conditioned to be. So we can decondition these aspects of us and operate in a way where there's more alignment and ease and flow and less resistance. And I found that, I kind of use it to look, I help a lot of my clients with wellness. There's multiple aspects of wellness, but it allows us to take a deeper look of why these physical things are happening on the body when we can look at what's going on energetically and where things are kind of misaligned. And we also have these tools to use so we can see when we are out of alignment. Like I used earlier, I was talking about frustration and bitterness and anger, like all of these based on specific aspects of your chart are emotions that are going to come up for you when you are, quote, out of alignment and not living according to this design. So we have these aspects where we can, it kind of puts us back on track. Like, okay, I'm feeling, for me, it's frustration for my type. Okay, now I know I'm frustrated. Something is misaligned. Like, where do I need to redirect or shift my energy or whatever?
So it's almost like human design points at where the work needs to be
Yeah.
done, and then you have other modalities that
Yeah.
help get them
That's
there.
it. Yes. And understanding how energy is moving through you. Dr. Joe Dispenza talks a lot about the energy centers, and that's an aspect of the chart. He doesn't use the word chakra, but that's what it is. If you can use whatever word you want, but it's these energy centers in the body that move and are correlated to specific organs and glands and emotions and energy. And so, yeah, we can look at how these are moving, how it's designed to move through you, where potential roadblocks could be, and why patterns might show up in these certain centers. This is a lot we can gather.
What does it feel like when you're on the other side of that healing journey?
Mm.
Like what's the end point? Like where you go through this hell, why go through it? Why not just spend the rest of your life resisting
Yeah.
it? What is that?
Yeah.
What is the end goal of that?
For me, the way I see it, the end goal is always growth. I believe that that's why our souls are here. I don't think our souls are ever here to be still. And if our souls are stagnant, it's just going to wither and die. Like everything on earth is meant to grow, and our soul is the same. And I believe that we're here to grow and evolve. There are certain lessons that we're meant to learn. There are certain lessons that we might have to learn over and over again, which is an aspect that we can look at in your human design chart. But I think that the reason we go through it, the reason we go through this process and the grief and the emotions and all of that is the wisdom we get in that chapter that we get to bring to the other side and the growth that's available and the opportunities that are available for us on the other side. None of us are meant to go on this life journey alone. Our souls all fit together into this little cosmic puzzle. And so the lessons we learn and the wisdom we gain in our own dark night of the soul is always meant to help other people. It's going to help us and our path and our soul's growth, but it's also here to help other people. So for me, I see it as benefiting the collective when we're going through this dark night of the soul, because yes, we're going to get our own wisdom and our soul gets these learnings, but we're also gathering this to help people on the other side. I mean, I've been able to help so many of my clients just based on my own experience of going through my various dark night of the soul experiences.
I find for myself, yes, I agree with all of that. Also, it's a deeper connection to the self, and it's bringing that back to that what we were talking about earlier. This is who you were. This is who you want to be or should be, or I don't know if I like the word should there,
Yes.
but that's who you actually are. And what I didn't realize when I was going through it is there's this, when you connect more deeply with yourself, there's this sense of strength.
Mm-hmm.
Just being able to sit in yourself. I find when I go out in the world and I just fewer things scare me these days. I don't know if that's the right word. Fewer things rattle me.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe that's the
Mm-hmm.
better word.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think with men especially, and I'm going to use that aspect to talk about this. There's when you meet new people, there's this sense of jockeying that goes on. Like it's really subtle, but you can tell it's there. And I just find that that doesn't rattle me.
Mm-hmm.
And guys tend to bullshit with each other.
Mm-hmm.
Back in the day, there was old Jeff would get rattled by it, but now it's like I'll give it right back, and I'll give it back 10 times what they give me, and it's all in good nature,
Sure.
but it's just this ability to sit in yourself and be
That's
confident.
it. Yeah, for sure. It's resilience too. I mean, it's just building that resiliency. And like you were talking about the
Yeah.
strength. I mean, yeah, that's what you're gaining.
You said wisdom. Can you define wisdom for us?
Hmm.
What does that mean?
That's a great question. I love, speaking of Dr. Joe Dispenza, he says, and I don't remember if it was a workshop that I did or if it was one of his books, but he talks about the difference between knowledge and wisdom. And wisdom is the lessons that you gain without an emotional charge. And he talks about how if we can look back at the things that, we've gone through and we've lived, if we can look at that and gather the learnings without an emotional reaction, then we've gained the wisdom. It's like we can see from this kind of bird's eye perspective, look at the bigger picture, right? We have this broader perspective of what was going on. And that's the wisdom.
Somebody defined it as someone I worked with defined wisdom as what's actually happening without the emotional charge. So
Mm-hmm.
exactly what you
Mm-hmm.
said. And I think that's what I'm taking from my own journey here is being able to pass that wisdom down to my kids. And that's why I like working with dads,
Mm-hmm.
because that's more valuable than money or
Totally.
houses or anything,
Mm-hmm.
like anything
Yeah,
physical. It's passing that wisdom down.
that's it.
And I think that's a cool way to look
Yeah,
at it.
yeah, I totally agree.
If somebody is in their own dark night of the soul and they feel like they're drowning, what's one thing you would want them to know?
The one thing I want them to know is that there is another side of this. Like there's always a way through. We're not trying to get out of it per se. It's not the way out, but there's a way through. Knowing that, like I said before, the breakdown comes before the breakthrough. For me, when I'm experiencing the dark night of the soul, I now have so much more hope than I would have had like the version of me that was going through it when I was getting divorced, because I know that there's something huge for me on the other side, opportunities, the wisdom we were just talking about. So just knowing that there is a way through, and if you just continue to take one step at a time, one step, follow the breadcrumbs, one step in front of the other, trust your intuition, you'll make it through. And there's something completely incredible on the other side of that.
You touched on a point there that it happens over and over and over again in your life. Even if you face the worst dark night of the soul, just know that it's going to happen again and again and again.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's not just this one and done thing that happens in your life. And the more you do it, the somewhat easier
Yeah,
it
no,
gets.
for sure. Right. Well, because now like there's something on the other side of this. Like it's not forever. This too shall pass, right? It's just in one chapter.
Yeah. Looking back, what are you most grateful for having gone through your various dark nights of the soul?
I mean, for me, it's all about the growth, and it's learning. You mentioned it before about the learning, like this deeper sense of self and learning about yourself. And for me, that's been the beauty of it is, I spent decades of my life, I mentioned disordered eating behavior before. I had spent decades of my life in that and hating myself and hating my body. And I think for me, I know self-love is such a like word these days. Like I hate even saying the word, but for me, that's what it's been. It's just this growth of self-love and loving myself and accepting myself and everything about myself, and using that to fuel my life and how I am in my relationships, my marriage, my kids, all of these things. So it's just that growth and love for self.
If somebody's interested in working with you, how do they find you?
You can visit my website, hopefulandwholesome.com. I also have a podcast by the same name, Hopeful and Wholesome, and it's all things health, wellness, spirituality, inspiration, a lot of the fun things we talked about today. And you can also, I'm most active on Instagram at the Hope Pedraza.
Thanks very much for giving us hope.
Thanks so much for having me.